Hey folks, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a rules overview of Blazon. Um, I just did an unboxing of it, and the rules are pretty simple, so I'm just going to kind of go through them real here. The rule book's not very long, I think it's only 8 pages front to back. Um, so that being said, basically in this game, you are building your shield, your Blazon, essentially. Your heraldry, your crest, whatever you want to call it. Um, and you're doing that by purchasing these cards or drawing cards from the two decks and placing them on your shield board, which I will show you in a moment. As you place them, you are going to gain prestige points, and that is basically how you win the game. The person with the most prestige points when the end of the game is triggered will win the game. That being said, let's go ahead and I'm going to dive into doing a little bit of a setup and then go through the rules. I'll probably try to get a solo game of this played in just a bit as well, but that video might not come for several days. So, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take this board here, set it out in the middle of the table. You're going to take all of the device cards, those are these cards over here. You're going to give them a shuffle. Now, the deluxe game does come with an expansion that adds more cards for this deck and more cards for this deck. You can optionally shuffle them in. It's entirely up to you whether you use them or not. You're basically going to give them a good shuffle, and then on this deck, you're going to put out 4 cards in a row along the bottom. And then you're going to be doing the same for the Tincture deck, which is what this deck is called. And then you will place 2 cards out below it. The little divider here kind of helps you keep them separate. The middle of this board is essentially just an explanation of these rules of what you can and can't do. So you're not going to be placing anything on this board in itself. And then the end game scoring is down here. You're going to take what were those cards called? They were called that's the distinction cards. So you're going to have a deck of cards. There's going to be 5 cards of A, 5 cards of B, 5 cards of C, etc. You're going to separate those out into the 5-card decks. You're going to shuffle them. You're going to put you're going to pull, they tell you to pull the bottom card from the deck, which is fine because this is face up. And you're going to assign them A, B, C, D, E along the rows there. You can see how they have the 4 white sections here. This is where you would put your cube if you meet one of the distinctions requirements. But you kind of slide it behind the castle so that the castle, the top of the wall there, separates the blocks. So on these cards, they are double-sided. So you see up in the top left, this is for 1 or 2 players. And then if you flip it over, this is for the 4th player on the top. And then if you flip it upside down, this is for 3 players. So you want to orient it in your section up here, depending on how many players are actually in the game. The rest of them that you don't use, you just throw aside back into the box. There are the animal achievement tokens. That's these giant wooden tokens. They tell you to set these aside. They're not used at the moment, but they can be. Oh no, I took that out of there and I can't get it back in. There we go. All right. So there are 5 of those. I will go over those in a second. They say to pull those out, set them aside. You're going to have a handful of these Herald tokens. They say just make a pile. They look like feathers and inkwells. Just create a pile of those. Every player is going to start with 1. Then, let me switch the camera over here. Everybody's going to take a player board, and you are going to take your scoring marker, which looks like a shield, and you're going to put it on the 0 space, and the 0 space covers this whole corner here. And this is where you're going to keep track of your prestige. You will take your 5 cubes in your color. These are your distinction cubes. These are what you're going to use to track whether you have completed one of the distinction cards, which we just discussed. They're going to go down here in the bottom right-hand corner of your shield. There's little spots for them. And then if you are going to use the abatement token, which is the token here that looks like a blood splotch, I think it's supposed to be an ink splotch, more specifically. You will place that down, covering up the -8 victory points or prestige points. Then each player will take one. You will give each player one of the Herald tokens. That's what they're called, Herald tokens. And you will draw 2 cards from each deck. So you will have 2 cards of the device deck. These are the... Where are my 2? These are the 2 tinctures, and these are the 2 devices. So you draw 2 cards of each. And that's going to be in your hand of cards. I'm just kind of showing these face up because I'm not really playing a game here, but these will be secret. You would not want other players to know what you have. Those are going to be drawn off the tops of both of their respective decks. That'll be your starting hand. They do say that if your starting hand... so let's look at one of these cards. Let me switch back over here to the other camera. So let's look at... we'll look at this card right here. We'll go over an anatomy of a card, and then we'll switch back up to to finalize setup here. If I can get that to focus. You going to focus for me? There we go. All right, so this is... Maybe you're going to focus? There you go. This is an example of a... Why is that so dark? All right, there we go. An example of a card. You're going to have the symbols in the corners. You're going to have a... what's the augmentation? That's this symbol up here. It's a cross for this one. It's the cross swords for this one. This is basically, if it's a square, right, then it is a device. And if it's a circle, like one of these, then it is a tincture. And that matches the symbol on the back of the cards. The prestige points, the victory points they're worth when you play them, are in the shields on either side. So this one's worth 1 victory point. This one's worth 3 victory points. Then below that, it's going to tell you where you can and cannot place these cards. So, for instance, this card can only be placed in the first column, 3rd row. This card can only be placed in the first column, 1st row. And then it gives you the name of the card. So... circling back to setup, if your initial starting hand has less than 5 prestige points, so if you count up all the points on your cards and it equals less than 5, you may draw another hand. So that pretty much covers setup. Every player is going to do that, set their board up that way, and then you will be good to go. There are spots on the left and right, well, on the right side of the board, you can see it here, where the tincture cards get discarded, and then the other side, the device cards will get discarded. Let's talk a little bit about card placement. So basically on your turn, you have one of 2 options. You can choose to draw 2 cards from the main board. You could draw 2 device cards, you could draw 2 tincture cards, or you could draw 1 of each. Or, wait, where is that and? You can, yeah, so that's an optional. So you're going to draw 2 cards blindly from the tops of the decks. You can do 2 and 2, or 1 and 1. After you've drawn those 2 cards, you will look at them and you will decide if you want to exchange them with any of the cards that are in the rows, the row below here. So if you draw the 2 tincture cards, you can look and see, do you want to exchange the 2 cards you just drew, or one or both, with the cards below here, and you can just swap them out. Same thing with the device cards, but you can only swipe device cards for device cards, and you can only swap tincture cards for tincture cards. Then whatever you have left, you take into your hand. So that's option 1 for what you could do. Option 2 is you will play a card onto your board. Now, when you play a card, you're going to have to look at the prestige value of the card. So, if I'm going to play this card, you'll see that's worth, it's worth 1 prestige point right there. So, now where can I play this card? I can play this card, if I look at the restrictions, first column, 3rd row. So I can only play this card down here, in this spot. And you'll see that spot has the diamonds, which are in the corner, below it. So if I choose to play this card, I can only place it right here. And the way I would place it is that I would cover up the symbols on the top so that the symbols on the bottom match the symbols on the card. So I would place it thusly, so that it is covering the green hawk-looking symbol, or whatever. I'm not sure what that symbol is supposed to be. Some kind of animal. You would cover that up so that the diamonds match the diamonds on the bottom. That card was worth 1 prestige point. So in order to place that, I have to pay for it. And I have to discard a card with equal to or greater value, or a number of cards equal to or greater value. So I could discard this card, which is worth 2, and that would just go over to here into the discard pile, and that pays for that card. I wasted 1 prestige point. You don't make change. I could have played the 4 and then really wasted prestige points. Additionally, you can place as many cards as you can afford to pay for. However, each card you place must be paid for separately. So I would not be able to place, let's say I also wanted to place the Azure card here. And I wanted to place the Azure card. This is a tincture card. So if I look at it, I can play it in any of the top row or any of the column, any column. And you'll see that has the question mark here, because it doesn't, all of the tincture cards have different symbols. So if I wanted to, I could play it here. And I could either place it on the bottom so the top is revealed, or I could place it over on the top so that the bottom is revealed. I'll place it on the bottom. So let's say I want to pay those. I play those 2 cards. This one's worth 1 point, so it would cost me 1 prestige point in discards to pay for this. And this one is worth 2 points, and would cost me 2 points in prestige, 2 prestige points in cards to place that card. I would have to spend both of my other 2 cards, even though this card is worth 4 prestige points. I can't use a single card to pay for both cards. Even though their total value is less than the 4, I can't do that. So I would have to burn both of these cards, the 5-pointer and the 4-pointer, to pay for both of these cards if I were to place them. Now, I would immediately score prestige points equal to whatever I just placed. So let's say that I did place those 2, and we discarded one face up here, and we'll discard the other one face up over here. So I did pay for those. I would get prestige equal to what I just placed. So this one's worth 2, this one's worth 3. So I would move my marker up to the 3rd spot on the prestige track around my shield board. And then it's the end of my turn. Then play passes, and it basically keeps going around and around. An additional option you have on your turn, well, let me get to that in a minute. Before I get to that, more about placing the cards on here. There are a couple of restrictions. So once you place a card in a row, and you choose either the top or the bottom, every other card in that row has to match either the bottom or the top. So since I placed this card here and I chose the bottom, these two cards that I place must also be on the bottom. So I'm going to have the pink square, and I'm going to have the mountain range card to place here. Those are the only two cards I can place here. Same with down here. So I covered the top slot here, so I can only place the top slot here. So I need the three dots, green three dots card to place here, and any tincture here. Additionally, I can not place the same tincture card here or here. So these cannot be similar to each other. And that's in the little icon that's on the board here. So these cannot be the same card. And these three cards up here cannot be the same card. The same tincture. So only the tincture, you can put a tincture here, here, and here. They cannot be the same. And then these two cards here cannot be the same. Now you're saying, well, if I'm looking at the board right, I can place tinctures on these three cards, but this tincture can only be placed on the top, and this tincture can only be placed on the bottom, and I'm not allowed to do that. Well, yes and no. You may, on your turn, decide to place a card that violates the placement rules. The only thing you cannot do is place a tincture over top of a spot where only a device can go, or a device over a slot where only a tincture can go. But you could, for instance, place a tincture here and choose to place it on the bottom. Now the symbols are not going to match at the top because the tincture is not going to have the square red checkerboard pattern. But what you would do is you would take your tincture. So let's just say I'm going to put tincture like that. Right? That's technically an illegal placement because that symbol does not match that symbol. However, I can take my abatement token off of my board and I will put it on that to indicate that I am taking an abatement on that card. It basically allows me to break the placement rules. If my abatement token is out on my shield at the end of the game, it is worth -8 prestige points. However, throughout the game, I may be able to place a card over top of this card. Let's say I want to change what card's there. I'm not going to lose the victory or the prestige points for covering up this card, but I would pull this abatement token back, and as long as I placed a proper card over top of it that would match, I could do that. So those symbols match there. So that would cover that symbol up. I'd take my abatement token back, and now I'm not out 8 prestige points at the end of the game. Or I could have covered it with another tincture. I could have covered it with this tincture, and in doing so would have moved it up so that the symbols still now match. They can be any symbol. However, in doing so, these two would also have to be on the top. Which, assuming they probably will be, because you only have one abatement token. Actually, no, they would probably be on the bottom. So I would probably not be able to do that and automatically move it up top, because then these two would be on the bottom, and that would not be a legal placement. Let me pull those back off here, get them off to the side. So that's the restrictions for placement. I believe that is all the only restrictions for the placement. Let me just double check. Yes. Yes. That's the only placement restrictions. So, like I said, on your turn, you can either draw 2 cards, possibly exchange them and then keep them in your hand, or you can perform a Blazon action, which allows you to put a card onto your shield as long as you can pay for it. Additionally, and another option on your turn that you can do is you can spend these Herald tokens. So if you spend a Herald token, you will throw it back into the pile, and then you will come back here to the main board, and it'll tell you the different Herald actions. So these over here, this tells you essentially what I just went through: picking 2 cards, possibly exchanging, or putting a card down and paying for it in the by discarding cards equal to or greater than the prestige value. Or you could ignore restriction rules, but you have to put your abatement token down on that card to indicate that you're breaking the rules. Spending one of these tokens is covered by this section over here. So there's 4 different things you can do. The first thing you can do is you can discard a 1 value prestige value card to place any card onto your board. So even if that, you could discard a 1 value card to place a 5 value card. So you're not paying for it, or you are, but you're not paying as much as you should pay for it. Again, you can't make change with that. So it doesn't have to be a 1 value, but you're basically discarding any card to place any card of another value. You only have to pay at least 1 prestige point for it. So if you have a 2 prestige card, you could still discard that and put down a 5 prestige card. It doesn't have to be a 1 prestige card that you are paying or discarding. The other option is you can take a card off of a row of either deck or off the top of the deck for discarding one of these. The third action you could take down here is basically wiping the whole row. You discard all these cards and you refill the row. And then the fourth action is you take the top card of either discard pile. So you could take the top card off the discard pile over here, or the top card off the discard pile over here. That's if you spend one of these. Additionally, down here is the scoring options, basically. So essentially, these augmentation symbols, which are going to show up on the cards above the prestige value, whoever has the most is going to score points for them. So whoever has the most will score 2 points. If exactly 2 people are tied for the most, then they both get 2. But if more than 2 people are tied for the most, then nobody gets points. That's in a 3 and 4 player game. In a 2-player game, only the most scores points. If both players have the most, then neither of them score points. And you will calculate that for each symbol. There is a symbol that is a question mark, or not a question mark, a star, I believe, that's supposed to be a wild. That does not actually count for these. Or a symbol that is a wild. Or an X. There is an X. If it has an X, it means there's no augmentation on it. I believe there's a symbol that doesn't count for this, and it's sort of like a wild symbol. Then we basically go to the distinction. Is that what they're called? Yes, distinction cards up top. So we didn't talk about those. Let's do that real quick. Distinction cards, as soon as you meet the requirements of the distinction card, then you will place one of your distinction cubes onto the card. And it's going to be in the leftmost slot, and you will score the victory points at the end of the game when we do end game scoring for where your cubes are placed on those cards. They're different. But basically it tells you what you need to have on your board. So for instance, for the potency up there in the top left, you would need to have 3 or more 5 prestige value cards on your board. As soon as you meet that requirement, you would place your cube over there on the far left, and you will score those 3 victory points at the end of the game. Now, let's say you did score that, and then you covered up one of your 5 point token or cards on your board, so you no longer have 3 or more 5 prestige cards on your board. You do not lose that. Once you score it, and then you don't have to worry about it ever again. Additionally, if you are the first person to place your distinction marker on a card, every other player will get one of the Herald tokens. So every other player gets one of these. So for instance, on the second distinction card there, you would need one of the pink squares, one of the purple diamonds, and the dragon head. I'm not sure what that is. Hawk head. Maybe it's supposed to be a hawk. Hawk head, eagle head. Griffin's head, maybe. I'm not sure. You would have to have one of each of those, and then you would be able to score your distinction. For the middle one here, you would need that Griffin's head. You would need the checkered red symbol, and you would need 3 or more of the castle prestige symbols. So like this card has that castle prestige. For the third card, you need the pink square. You would need the yellow checkered circle, and you would need 3 of that cross augmentation symbol. This was the augmentation symbol as well. And then for the fourth card, you would need 1 square, red checkered square, 1 cross swords augmentation, 1 cross augmentation, and 1 castle augmentation, and then you would score that. That's pretty much final scoring for that. You get 1 point for each of your leftover Herald tokens. You get 2 points for the animal tokens. So how do you get animal tokens? Well, as you're going around your prestige board over here, when you hit the 10, the 20, the 30, the 40, and then the 50, the first person to get to one of those gets one of those animal tokens. And it is worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. Additionally, every time somebody gets here, or anytime the first player gets here, they get that token, and then every other player gets one of the Herald tokens as a consolation prize, I guess. So once those 5 are out, you're going to want to try to get those to get there first for the victory points, but don't feel bad if you don't, because you are going to be getting a Herald token that you can use to perform one of those additional actions. So those animal tokens are worth 2. You will get 2 points if you have completed your entire board. So if you filled in every slot on your shield board, you will get 2 victory points. And then if your abatement token is actually out onto the board and not in the space where it starts, then you will lose 8 prestige points. And then basically whoever has the highest prestige will win. If there is a tie, you go to your hand of cards, not what's out on your board. Sorry. Not what's out on your board, but what you actually have in your hand of cards. And whoever has the highest prestige on the element cards in their hands will be the winner. And if you're still tied after that, then it says that they share the victory, which I always hate in games. There has to be a winner. I don't like sharing. So maybe some things we did not discuss. As you remove cards from the rows, they get refilled. So as you pull cards out of these rows here, they will be refilled. You can only have 7 cards in your hand, so that your hand limit is 7 cards. What else do we need to talk about? End of game. How is the end of game triggered? Well, if somebody If a player loops all the way around on prestige points and passes 50, or lands on or passes 50, that will trigger the end game. As soon as that player does that, all other players get one more turn, and then you go to final scoring. If, as soon as one player fills all sections on their board, so all 7 cards are out on their board, that triggers the end game as well. Every other player gets one more turn, and then you go to final scoring. Or if as soon as one player places their 5th distinction cube, so claims their 5th card at the top, all other players get one more turn, and then you go to final scoring. That is pretty much Blazon from a rule standpoint. The rule book here does a great job of explaining this game. There are anything basically in the green text or the green background basically is, I don't want to call it flavor, but it's history. So it kind of explains what's going on, why explains about the heraldic shields, what the augmentations mean, how they relate to real life back in the day. Same thing with the tinctures and the devices. There's a lot of history there that's nice to read about. The abatements. So, but the rulebook is very well done. That's pretty much the rules for Blazon. It looks like it's going to be a fun, interesting game. We'll see. I'll probably try to get a playthrough done of it with a couple players in the near future. I think I might actually do a solo playthrough of it now, but that video probably won't go up for a few days. But anyways, that is the rules explanation for Blazon. Thanks for watching.